Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Y: The Last Man. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So we have Agent 355. I'm going to go back to that and just instead of just calling her Sarah, because it seems like that's the moniker we're like leaning with the most, rather than just going by Sarah or her fake alias and stuff like that. So. But her and Yorick have made it to Boston, but obviously the military is kind of like running things. The whole setup definitely the whole grand scheme of things, you definitely feel it, but just for whatever reason, like specifically Boston, I definitely like got that feel of like The Last of Us. It definitely kind of gave me that type of feeling vibe, which obviously it's like the comic obviously predates The Last of Us, so that might be pulled like more aesthetically, but I think it's just because like The Last of Us has that like realism to it in certain regards. I think maybe that's what adds to it, but tangents and all that aside, basically Sarah ends up going off to meet with like the military so she could find out about Allison, Dr. Mann. And I thought it was so interesting. And then I'm curious, like, right, she walks up, she says, like, it's like, oh, this is who I am. Like, are you going to let me through private? Like, you kind of have to walk the walk if you want to lie. And I'm curious, with that lie, was that actually her building off of a previous life that she, like, with CR, like, is this a previous alias that she had? So, like, that's why it came a little natural to her. Or is it just because she flips identities like no one else's business, that it comes with the trade, comes with her said business, that she has to that the improv of like coming up with an identity, knowing how to just like immediately like show the confidence necessary to be like, yeah, I belong here, this is who I am, that she was able to just kind of walk through like no issue. I'm curious which lane that was. I feel like it might have been just came up on the spot, like she just like, all right, I'm going, I give myself a bit of an identity, just because when she went through, she kind of sighed relief. Like, if it was a more solidified identity, I feel like she wouldn't worry about it. I mean, to be fair, it's like it's the apocalypse, so like, who's going to be checking that? All she had to do was like say some stuff to be like, yeah, I'm official. So, but basically they're dealing, like, it's a recurring thing between them and the protesters, because obviously you see the signs all over town talking about, like, obviously calling Jennifer a liar. Even the messages I thought were so interesting. Our sons, which is so interesting because obviously this is on FX on Hulu, but like on Freeform there's a show Motherland Fort Salem, and there's a whole thing in that, kind of spoilerish but not really, about not our daughters. So it's just kind of like, it was this interesting like flip side to that, just like just timing and stuff like that. I think it's interesting. Once again, the comic predates all of it anyway, but it's just, like I said, it's just interesting. But I thought that was such a fascinating thing of like that being, and it makes a lot of sense. It's all over the place, but I think probably bigger places like that, probably where there's more of a military presence, you get that aspect of, oh, they know more than they're letting on. So that's what the protesters are kind of about. And so Sarah, but the point I was making was kind of interesting is like the military and the protesters are kind of like doing their thing. It's like, right, they start rioting, we come in, some tear gas, some like non-real, like some rubber bullets type of thing, and they back down for a couple hours, we go rest, and then like the next day repeat it over and over again. Even at one point Sarah's like, are you, Agent 355 is like, are you really like gonna go out right now? And it's like, yeah, it might rain. It was like, because it's almost like, I guess this is kind of all they have, because like basically they have to protect these facilities. Like, there's so much like history, and like it's that post-apocalyptic thing, which I think is so fascinating, when people decide like they want to protect what is considered like the important things, like history and art and stuff like that. But it's almost like, I guess, like when it comes to post-apocalyptic stuff before now, like until more recently, I never would have ever thought about like those being things that are important to hold on to, but they kind of are. But it's interesting because while this is happening, Yorick is on the flip side. He's kicking it with the protesters. It's not like they're terrible people or anything like that. He ends up helping them out, and Lady Steph that he runs into just assume like, oh, like, my brothers hold up somewhere with other people. It's like, you can get some testosterone there, and you're exactly right, because not many people are going to immediately jump to the conclusion of like, because it is just common enough place to be like, right, if anyone's alive, it's not men, it's people who transition. So so that I think that's such an interesting thing. Yorick did not have that knife for long, because I love at first she was like, oh, and he was talking, Ampersand was like making noise, and he's like, what was I supposed to say? Like, this is the first time she ever gave me a knife. I think for him it's like, oh, she trusts me enough to actually give me a weapon to defend myself. But it's like, right, the moment she does, you end up losing it. So that was nice. But eventually they were able to track down Dr. Mann, because she wasn't on the list and stuff like that of like who the government was like keeping tabs on and stuff like that. Even like the building where her lab and stuff is gone. So I have to look it up afterwards, but the actress who plays Dr. Mann, I'm like, I know her from something. I just don't know what. I feel like it's not, maybe it's just one specific thing, but I feel like there's a few things I feel like I've seen that actress in, and I can't place what I recognize her from. If I figure it out, I'll just put it in the comments of this review, if I remember to, hopefully I do. But regardless, they ended up tracking her down, and she's like not who you thought she'd be. She's very like, because I guess like you have your perceived notion of like who she is, but she's a little bit of like a rebel, like when it comes to being like, like, I mean, literally one of her pictures is her at the Union building, literally with her pants down. I don't know whether she's just pissing on it or whether she's literally like shitting on it, whatever the case may be. It's just like not what you expect. I also love like, yeah, we got a little peek at Yorick, picking locks, and Sarah's just kind of like, move out of the way. He's like, no, just give me a second. And he's like, you're adding too much pressure. He's like, all right, fine. She's like, move. She's like, all right, you go ahead and do it. So because Sarah did do that, though, Allison immediately attacked Yorick the moment. He's like, right, I heard gunshots, so like, of course I'm gonna attack the people that are in here. But I love that she didn't give a shit about Yorick until like, wait, there's two of you, a male monkey and you? And it's like, yeah. She's like, alone, I couldn't care. But the fact is, the two anomalies are like, you both were together when it happened. Like, that's the thing of like, because I think it'd be an even more astronomical, like, if it was a thing of like, because if they were separated, that's one thing. But the fact is that both of these males, a male monkey and a male human, were together. That there is probably some tenuous something there of like, maybe it was the environment, like whatever it is, like maybe something that's in Yorick, like he was around Ampersand enough for it to rub off, or maybe it's vice versa. Who knows? Like, we haven't really gotten into that. They didn't really discuss that too much. There was some really interesting discussions with Allison, which I'll go ahead and jump to, because obviously, like, Yorick is trying to ask her questions about, because she wants to go to San Francisco, because for her, like, all her research, like, if they don't go to San Francisco, because that's where the lab is, that's where all the necessary pieces is, because all the people that could help her with this are dead. So basically, unless you want me to go back with you and to DC and have to start over for 15 years of research, then like we have to go to San Francisco, which is like, that's a pretty long trip. But even York trying to squeeze in there, like, that we could squeeze by Ohio. So, I mean, it's in that direction. So that's fascinating. Going like full blown cross country in that regard. But he kind of gets her a little drunk because he's just, sharing drinks, trying to talk and get to learn more about her. And they have a really fascinating discussion about like, it's like these rare things that happen in genetics where there are some, one of the instances she was referencing was like, it's a rare, really, really rare thing where there are people who were born assigned female who will have like there's the situations where some people will not grow like male like genitalia till like they'll hit puberty or something like that. I forgot what she was saying. Like it was something fascinating like that. And also like there's situations where like someone could be like have male testes on the inside, but on the outside they have your typical female genitalia. So there are people like, because this small like sampling of people who died because they had a Y chromosome and they went their entire lives never knowing. I was like, that's so fascinating to think about, like getting into the minutia of just like, right, they're like genetic, like, I don't know if that'd be considered like a genetic anomaly, but it's like, it's a genetic rarity. And I'm like, that's sad. And it's interesting, but also super sad because like for her, it's like, because it's like, right, the whole point is like, right, men are supposed, like, this is all about fixing, like, you know, bringing men back, but like, and she's making a poignant point of like, bringing men back isn't like, for her, it's just like, men is fine, whatever, but it's like, it's not going to be the end all be all to fixing everything, which there's a layers to that, because it's like any post-apocalyptic situation, I think. Like, you think you just resolved the situation. In this case, bring back men. Even if you did, it's like, well, for one, like, would the world return to normal anyway? Like, this isn't really probably... There's other points that she was probably more likely aiming for, but I feel like this could be part of that conversation of, like, will society immediately fit back? Because also, you know, it's the thing about a post-apocalyptic world. It's like a lot of people did a lot of stuff, went a little crazy, and like, how do you rein that back in when you're trying to rebuild some form of a normal society? So there's that angle to it. But then she also brings up the fact is we lost so much more than men. Because it is something that, like, that's the only conversation that's really being had about, like, trying to bring men back. But, you know, what about the conversations about, like, right, the women that also we lost because of their Y chromosome situation that they weren't even aware of. But also, on top of that, the animals. It's like giraffes, lemurs, and all this monkeys. It's like all of that. Like, there's so much more in this world that was lost that we will never get back. Yeah, we can bring men back, but it's also like, it kind of fits a little bit with what I was saying too, of like what we lost. It's just too immeasurable to ever get back. Like, bringing back men is one thing, but like that would never encompass all that we lost, you know, because it's like, because her, and it's interesting because I was all like, I never really, because the big question is like, how would they go about like you using Yorick to like bring back the male species? And it turns out Allison's like stuff, it seems like it's borderlining on like human cloning, because she's like, yeah, the government's not too keen on that type of stuff. And like, even you're hearing that for the first time, like, wait, human cloning? It's like, it's in relation to it, you know. And it's so like, because obviously there's also the thing of like, oh, like, they need to make sure it's before he gets too old. He's like, I'm 27. She's like, really? You look older. Which I wonder, is that supposed to be like the actor who plays York is probably in his 30s, so maybe that's kind of supposed to be like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, but also just like typically people look, maybe sometimes people can look older than what they actually are. I don't know if that was what that was supposed to, like I said, be a wink, wink, nudge, to like kind of like inside joke in that regard. But, I also love, and we never got it, but I love that he was like, when like, Sarah, Agent 355, like I almost, because I want to say the names more than I do the numbers, because like, I think, because I do the same thing with Umbrella Academy. I try to call them by their names rather than numbers. At least I think I do. Like, I could be mistaken. Maybe I do call them by their numbers. I'm pretty sure I call them by their names. Regardless, but 355 and Allison kind of got into an argument about like, oh, like, because she's like against the protesters, but Allison's about it, because it's like, oh, they're just upset because they think that the government's hiding something from it. And then she points to York. It's like, the government literally is hiding something from them. So it's like, for her, it's the conversation about how, you know, the government does what it does, so like you can't really blame the people when they feel the way that they are, because that's also like something that comes up on the other side of the episode, like at, you know, kind of on the more like quote unquote White House front, like we're, you know, with Jennifer and everything, and not to say quote unquote White House because it's White House official people, but obviously they're not at the White House, and you know, that whole thing. But there's so much disinformation out there. Like, there's people like that, like, it's like they can't get that information out there to be like, this is what's really going on fast enough, because everyone's got their own theories, and that information is passing around like wildfire. As they say, it's like, it's a terrible game of telephone going on out there, and that's just adding more fuel to the fire of people not knowing what's going on, and the belief, and just like people being scared and angry and believing the government knew a lot more than they did, which in certain regards, which we'll circle back to soon enough, like, it does seem like there was some heads up in certain regards. I don't think everyone knew what was what, but there might be some higher official that had some inkling, some ideas. Because it didn't seem like the president knew, but obviously, like, they knew enough to, like, send Sarah to try and protect the president, because they knew, like, some incoming attack, or there was some plausible threat, you know? Obviously with CR, because CR responded directly to the president, and, like, would get around the red tape and stuff like that, right? So, that's just kind of a fascinating element to this whole, because I feel like most post-apocalyptic worlds, like the only like misinformation you ever really have to worry about, it's like, oh, like it's usually a thing of like, oh, a cure. It's like, well, you don't have to really worry about that because all of the men were killed in this one swoop, so it's not like a thing of like, oh, we've got to like, because that's still not really been too much of the conversation either, too, of like, right, if you were to bring men back, is the virus still in the air enough to like kill any future men? Like that whole conversation, like I think it's come up, but not to like the full extent. Like we'll probably get into it more like now that we've got Allison part of the crew and everything. But what I thought was fascinating is like, right, we're going to get Sarah's like, we're going to call the president and try and see if we can get like some transport or something, or what she wants us to do. And Sarah makes an excuse to be like, oh yeah, the satellite phone's not working. I'm like, why are you lying? What are you doing? And then she goes to that address. I was like, oh man, I actually completely forgot about that. She's had it since episode 2 and I just completely forgot about it. I was like, oh right, the address. It's like, yeah. I was like, oh. Because let's not forget, she got that address before she's the one that before she pointed them in the direction of Allison. It's like, right, Allison can help, but why not also make a side trip while you're going to be in the general area? So it's like, she already had her, like, probably, like, it probably just, like, worked out where she's like, oh, here's Allison. And, like, it's like, did you really pick the best person for this? Or did you pick her because you knew she'd be in the general area? Or is it just kind of like, it all worked out coincidentally, like she is the best person and she also happens to be close enough to the area I need to go. So she rolls up there and runs into another agent. So it's 355 versus 525, and they kind of like, right, we're going to keep doing this all day. It's like, she's not here. It seems like the person who recruited them, which I guess I'm surprised I never immediately like thought of this. It's like, oh, it's like a Black Widow program. It's like, I don't know why my mind didn't immediately jump to that, especially like with them pointing guns at each other. It's like, oh, you literally saw this like similar situation a couple months ago when you watched Black Widow. I was like, I don't know why it didn't immediately come to my mind. Secret like organization, kind of doing some like behind the scenes type of stuff. But obviously there's a conversation about Fran. She's the one that kind of recruits everyone. I guess like she's the head honcho of this. And so, because we've only met kind of like the handlers to a certain extent, because it's like, what was it like? Oh, your 1055s alive, and she's like, hell no, they're not, or whatever. Like the people who kind of like I said, they're handlers. So it is the thing of like, right, so there is some inkling of like they knew what was what. And obviously 525 wants to find Fran so she could put a bullet in her and then like try and live some form of a normal life. Because it's a whole conversation of like, oh, let me guess, like you were foster care. It's like, oh, she just happened like to come and find you when you had nothing. So we have no idea how long they've been a part of this program. Like maybe it is kind of like a Black Widow thing of like since you were a child. Maybe, because we've only gotten little tiny like peeks into 355's like life and world. Like we got like flashes. Was that episode? Yeah, no, last episode that we got like peeks into a tiny bit. But that's what pisses Fran off, of just kind of like this life, and it's just like, I think it all came crumbling down like after dedicating your entire life to all of this. And like, because I think it's also like Fran has so many answers about maybe their past that it's just like she's the one that recruited them when they had nothing. And I think it's like, I think 525 was taking it as from the perspective of like, you took advantage of me and so many other people when we had nothing. And it's also like, you just happen to not be here. Like, you're running, like, you knew what was up and you didn't give anyone the real heads up. Like, I don't know. That's definitely going to be interesting. Like, I'm wondering because it definitely seems like 355, like, has a very, like, deeper relationship with her. Because, like, she's going above and beyond. Because she, like, also takes some, because 525, like, gives her all these different supplies. And 355 takes, like, tracers and stuff like that. It's like, right, wherever Fran is, she's off the grid, and she doesn't want to be found. And we do see at the end, like, Sarah does still have that tracer and she's activated it. Once again, lying about like, hey, your mom said it's okay to go, like, which I think is total, maybe no, because like it has to be horse crap, because it's, I don't know why. Once again, I always think it's so weird when I censor myself. It's like, at this point in the review, might as well go full blown. Like, I early 30 seconds is always the thing, but like, I don't know, horseshit. I should have said that. But it's like, I feel like we would have gotten that conversation, especially with what Jennifer's kind of dealing with, like, this episode and some questions that kind of come up about 355 that I'm like, that probably, so it's like, yeah, Sarah's lying. I mean, so, but I guess for her, it's like, she's got a mission to complete. And it also, like, I don't know whether it's a thing of, if she got this mission that maybe she's hoping Fran's going to find her and that she needs to let Fran know about these circumstances. Like, maybe that's what it is. It's like, right, she said, like, oh, I work for the president, but it's like, no, you work for Fran and you're trying to find her because you're probably going to let her know about, you want her to find you, Yorick, and Allison. I think that's kind of where they're going with that. We'll have to, definitely have to wait and see. Really quickly, though, it is interesting where, like, Allison did say, like, right, I do kind of, like, feel bad for you when she was talking to Yorick, because it's like, right, you will never have any form of a normal life, because he was hoping, like, when it's all said and done, kind of save the world, have a normal, it's like, you will never have a normal life, like, you will always be, like, a lab rat, you will always be poked and prodded, you and Ampersand, because it's like, you are, like, the key to, like, continuing the human race to a certain extent, so it's like, so I just think that's kind of fascinating, but, I'm curious to learn more about this Fran, about 355 circumstances, like what she's really got. Like, I think it is a thing of like, right, this is a very important mission I am taking part in, but it's like, part of her is probably like, Fran gave me this, like, obviously she's probably the one that, like, doles out the assignments and stuff like that. Once again, she's the one that personally, I guess, handpicked everyone for this program and this whole operation. So it's like, she has to have some insight to, like, what's going on in that regard, so we'll see on that front. But the other side of things is Jennifer dealing with, like, okay, so Regina's going to be here, we're going to have to put on, like, the happy faces and stuff like that, give her a high position, and other people being like, how high of a position are we going to go? Like, we should have just let the Israelis keep her, because it's like, we don't want her, but it's like, right, like, hopefully if they give her a high enough of position, she, like, it'll feel like she's a part of the group, so they won't have to worry about it. Obviously, like, one of, like, the military people is like, right, we found out about the helicopters, and Jennifer's like, right, and it's like, tell him to keep it low-key, and you don't want to waste resources, but look into it, and the person comes back and is like, right, there was a plane crash, there were bodies, well, like, the fact is, we can't tell with everything that happened, but, like, they most likely couldn't survive, and so, like, Jennifer's holding Christine's hand, and it's like, okay, now I'm sitting here thinking about it, I'm like, is that actually the actress who was Eleanor's friend in Good Place? I don't think it is now. Now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, I don't think that's the actress. I think I'm confused her with someone else. I know it's episodes later, and I'm thinking about that now. I'm like, no, I don't think that's that actress. Like, once again, another thing I have to look up of, like, why I recognize her. Regardless. Because, like I said, I don't think that's the same actress. I think I was, like, mistaken in that regard. But, like, because obviously it's like, she's scared, like, what if it's Yorick? What if it's him? And obviously she whispers something in Christine's ear, but look who's looking. Kimberly, like, waiting for her chance to strike. And so Christine goes in the bathroom and was like, oh, this is going to get a little weird. And then she's like, right, like, that plane went down because those pilots were looking for Hero for Jennifer, right? It's like, I get it. Like, if I had a child left in this world, I'd do anything too. And Christine's like, can you choose another time to try and blackmail me? And it turns out, like, she's bleeding and she's like, I think I'm having a miscarriage. I was like, Jesus, oh my God. But then it turns out, oh no, bleeding's kind of normal. It's a little bit of a scare, but it's actually the miracle of life is happening because you're pregnant, most likely with a girl. And Kimberly's so excited, and Christine's like, can we just keep this a secret? And I think that's going to be an issue later on, because the problem is, like, right, like, there's not much good news, like, reproduction-wise, so, because she's, like, 14, like, no, she thought she was like, oh, maybe I'm 10 weeks pregnant, and it's like more like 12, so it's like, it seems like, which is even sadder, because, like, obviously it's like your child's going to grow up never knowing their father, like, that's a sad thing. I mean, it's also like, man, having a baby under these circumstances, the world being wild, you got to keep, I mean, you're in the centerfold of, like, one of the biggest governmental secrets about Yorick, and it's like, you got to keep that, but also Kimberly's going to be so tight close to you, because, like, she's going to live vicariously through you, so she's going to help you deal with the baby situation. She wants to be there for you, because it's like, right, what she lost, she can almost not necessarily get it back, but like I said, live vicariously through Christine, which she's not even telling the president, because I think, like, just like she wants, like they're trying to protect York because that'd be a whole issue if the world found out about him. Two, God, you know what I forgot to talk about earlier too? Like I brought it up when they were arguing back and forth, 355 and Allison. Yorick was like, "Oh, I can tell you that tuna fish joke. You want to hear it?" He's like, "Did I tell you?" And just 355 just staring at him. And then later on, Allison's like, "So what's the joke?" And we never actually got to find out what the actual joke was, especially when she was like, "Oh, talking about like she doesn't like teaching. It's just kind of like it pays the bills. That's all it is. She doesn't like she doesn't like young people. She doesn't want to get like a like." She's anti-corporation. Like, once again, she's kind of like, I mean, I guess considering, like, she is doing, like, human cloning, like, research and stuff like that. Like, she's dabbling in that fringe that, like, the fringe of, like, science that the government kind of frowns upon. So it's, like, it makes sense for her to kind of be the rebel, like, personality-wise. It actually fits, like, with what her research is. It, like, coincides with, like, yeah, that makes sense that person would be researching that lane of things. But then he was like, "Oh yeah, like I'm a teacher." I'm like, I love how you phrase it. It's like, "Yeah, teacher of magic." And she's like, almost looking at him like, "Really?" But regardless, circling back to the old Jennifer thing. Oh, it was more so specifically the Christine thing. I'm like, I'm curious to see what they do with the Kimberly thing, because I feel like that could end up being a nasty situation in its own right. Like that could turn complicated, especially because Kimberly made it clear later on when she's talking to Regina. Oh, lines in the sand have to be drawn. I've said that about something else recently. Oh yeah, like because I'm watching Midnight Mass right now, and no spoilers, because I'd even thrown this out there in the trailer. It hasn't even kind of gotten there in the show, but I'd thrown it out there in the based on the trailer that I kind of felt like it was going to be a lines in the sand, drawn in the sand type of situation. And but obviously a post-apocalyptic situation, that's kind of no surprise in this. I mean, I'm specifically referencing this, but I don't know whether like Kimberly's going to use the pregnancy in that regard of trying to get Christine on her side, because that could be something they can rally around. Because this baby's going to be seen as like, oh my God, this is a miracle baby. And that was the point I went on before I went on my whole tangent. I'm so sorry, I'm all over the place. I'm a little scatterbrained recording this right now. Kind of no different from like 99% of the other times I'm recording stuff, but I digress. The point I was making is how, like, maybe that's why Christine hasn't said anything, because, like, Yorick would, like, people would lose their damn mind about Yorick. Her being pregnant, like, girl or not, it doesn't matter. It's like her being pregnant at a time like this, people are going to rally around that baby. And I think that, because it's going to be like, wow, like, how many pregnancies are actually happening right now? Like, stuff like that I'm sure that's going to be part of the conversation. So I think Christine doesn't want her whole situation be on blast. Doesn't want it to be everyone else's business, so that's why she's keeping it tight-lipped. But also, like, probably, like, Jennifer might sideline her a little bit if she finds out. So it's like, right, I gotta be in the action, gotta be a part of this, which Jennifer's now dealing with the fact is, Christine came to her and was like, right, those pilots, it turns out, it was the pilots, it wasn't Yorick and, 355. But then you have her be like, Jennifer start putting together, it's like, you don't think she's the reason why that happened? It's like, no. Christine's like, it was just an accident. But she's like, no, but 355 said she'd take care of it. Like, do you think she took that as, like, my acknowledgement to do it? Which is like, no. But now she's stressing about it because she's like, it's my fault, those pilots being dead. It's like, who did I send my son out there with? I need you to look into the CR thing. Like, we need to find out, like, all that access, like, information about finding out who she is. So we'll kind of get a little bit of more information about CR, not necessarily from Sarah, but from Jennifer and stuff like that. That's also, like I said, why I'm like, there's no way she actually contacted, there's no way 355 contacted Jennifer, considering, like, Jennifer kind of tail spinning the way she is right now. I'm not sure who she sent her son off with, because it's like the whole conversation, like, right, she works for me, so her actions kind of reflect upon me. So her killing those pilots to keep them quiet about Yorick, it's like, it comes with the territory of what she does, but it's also like, it's not like the president co-signed that. Like, that was supposed to come through me because you work for me, but it's like, that's why I say, like, I don't think she works for Jennifer. I think she works for, Fran, but, we'll see. But other than that, there is the Regina situation, and it's like, right, like she's back, and everyone's like, oh, clapping, so happy to have you back. The moment, like, she got wheeled in, like, in a wheelchair, and then the moment she was just with Kimberly, she stands up. I was like, oh, I guess that was just for, because, you know, I mean, I get it, like, you know, I've been in this situation because I've had, like, surgeries where, like, hospitals, like, maybe I think they typically, I mean, maybe it's just because of my circumstances at the time, like I fractured my leg, but I think they just have to wheel you out regardless, don't they? So I'm like, I mean, this is a little different. It's the apocalypse and everything, so like, I doubt that like sticks, but it's like, I think it was her trying to like present like I'm after what I've been through, I'm back, you know, I'm hurt and injured, but I'm still alive. I've got my strength, I've got my pride. But then like behind closed doors, it's like, no, I'm gonna stand up, I'm fine. I mean, granted, the moment like, because she was back to sitting down. No, she was standing up before Jennifer came in the room, right? But like Kimberly's like, right, people choose sides, you got friends here, and Regina's like, okay, because like, but she even talks to Jennifer being like, oh, I know what this is, you don't want to, like, it's like, oh, like, we're all in this together as long as you're in control. So it's like, yeah, you can already see the seeds of that turning into an issue. She's like, oh, could you get me something to eat? He's like, yeah, let's see what we can find you. And it's like, oh yeah, those fake pleasantries, like the whole like whole thing of like, yeah, just having to be friendly. Once again, like, they have to put on their big political faces, you know, under these circumstances. But we're getting like our first inkling, like real like touches of that. You know, it's going. You definitely know it's going to go majorly sideways, especially when you're keeping such a major secret. And once again, only two people there know, Jennifer and Christine, and I think Christine's going to break for whatever reason. Like, Kimberly's going to get that out of her, and that information is going to get used. Because also, it's not going to look good for Jennifer. On one case, you, like, not letting us know that the potentially one living man out there, but two, that the fact is it's your son, it's looking a little sus. The fact is that, oh, your child hero, because if she rolls up eventually, which last time we saw her, she was like what I at the time believed to be a militia group, we'll see, but like, Hero's alive and with the circumstances she's in, and it also turns out your son's alive. You lost your husband, but once again, there's a conversation about like, some people lost more than others, you know, like that equivalencies of grief of like who lost more and who lost less type of thing, you know. So that's all going to be very, very interesting to see where it all takes us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.